Towards full international border reopening on the 21st of this month. Being vaccinated is, though, a prerequisite for all travellers, and a new form of language is being adopted to describe what's necessary on that. The term fully vaccinated will be replaced by up to date with vaccination, to cater for those who are coming from countries where 2 doses of vaccine are available, but a third, a booster if you like, is not. So states here still have the right to impose their own restrictions based on a person's vaccination status, but Health Minister Greg Hunt says the requirement to be fully up to date at the international border will be recognised by all levels of government.
The ATAGI advice is expressed that it relates to domestic. Our international advice as a Commonwealth is that we will continue to require the double vaccination rate. There are many countries which are not advanced in their booster programs, and so that will remain the international standard, but we will continue to follow medical advice. States and territories were apprised of this last night, and I understand all states and territories are considering this when they look at their domestic restrictions, but the clear understanding is that the Commonwealth sets the determination for international arrivals.
Now, many senators have left Canberra for the week after Parliament rose last night. Apart from appearances at Estimates Committee hearings next week, they have only 2 days left to sit before Australians, we expect, will head to the polls. Queensland's One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts is still in the capital, though, and he joins us now. Malcolm Roberts, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing after a hellish week, really, for the Parliament, maybe not the Senate. You didn't get to deal with the Religious Discrimination Bill. I think we first saw you at the church service when Parliament resumed on Tuesday. What's the perspective from where you sat in the chamber? Did you want it to be brought on yesterday when ultimately it wasn't?
Well, we need to end the discrimination against religion, Greg, and thank you very much for having me back. But we need to end the discrimination against religion. It is quite affecting hundreds of thousands of people of faith around this country, many denominations, not just Christian, but also Muslim, Hindi, Jewish, and others. So it is really important. We're looking forward to the debate. As you know, we vowed not to support any government legislation, but we changed on this particular one because our argument is being that we need to free up the country and remove these injection mandates, the various COVID restrictions that are undemocratic and intimidate people and are intruding on people's personal freedoms.
So what was the calculation behind that, Malcolm Roberts? Just to explain why you relented or reversed that sort of blanket ban on government legislation. How would that have worked if we can imagine a scenario in which religious discrimination had come into the Parliament, into the Senate, and you had supported it? Was there a quid pro quo? Had you extracted any undertakings in return?
No, not at all. We have been very, very strong on this. And as I said, what we want is freedom for the people of Australia, return of basic freedoms and human rights. And so we would have been hypocritical had we not backed this particular bill because it is about improving freedoms. So we had no hesitation.
And when you say, just to interrupt again, Malcolm, this particular bill, is that the Religious Discrimination Bill as it came up from the House amended?
No, thank you very much for recognising that, Greg. The original bill in its unchanged form. We cannot support the current bill with the amendment from Rebecca Sharkey, just cannot. So we'll be working with the senators to make sure that we get that back to original and get it back to being very, very basic. It
all seems pretty academic now, though, doesn't it, Malcolm Roberts? I think we've already observed the number of days left for the Senate sitting as a full Senate is 2, and the budget occupies most of those. It's not actually going to happen in this Parliament.
No, I've only been in the Senate this time 2 years, so I'm still a new chum. But it seems very difficult, and I think the government is looking for legal advice because I think they're making a case. This is partly hearsay, making a case that it's unconstitutional with the Rebecca Sharkey's amendment. So that will probably send them back to the drawing board.
It does.
But it is going to be difficult, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah, the timing seems to be very awry, to say the least. Can I ask you about protests just outside the doors of the building we're in? For 2 weeks now, we've had the convoy to Canberra, and I think you've been out to speak to them at various times. What can we say it's actually achieved? Because there seems a really big disconnect between their demands, many though they are, and anything that this parliament could do. In fact, the parliament's not responding to them in any way.
Well, we first of all need to recognise where these people are coming from, and I'm one of them. I join these protesters. They're on the right track to bring back our freedoms and our basic human rights in this country, which have been stolen.
But are they targeting the right parliament? What is it that the federal government, this parliament, could do to remove mandates which are really under state control, as we know?
They could not happen, Greg, without federal support. The access to health data, for example, the funding for backing up state government restrictions, and it came from Prime Minister Morrison's own national cabinet, and so the source is there, and we've got the Prime Minister party in government buying 220, maybe now 280 million doses. They've got to get rid of these things, so they are welcome. Plus, the Prime Minister led himself by putting pressure on aged care and pressure on employers generally in large companies to put in injection mandates. So the Prime Minister, without his support, without his, I think, orders and direction, it could not happen. He certainly enabled it. So this is a clear breach of Section 51, Clause 23A, that the Commonwealth Government cannot mandate or cannot conscript medication.
And do you think this protest movement will be persistent and back again when Parliament, or the Reps is back next week, but how long do you understand that they're going to keep occupying the space here outside Federation Mall and Old Parliament House?
It's a good question. To see the resolve, all we have to do is look at the number of people that are coming down from far north Queensland, 2,000 kilometres. From Western Australia, Perth, right across our country, thousands of kilometres. And they're determined, and they're coming down just for a few days. They'll be back, I think. And look at what's happening in Ottawa with the Canadian truckies. They're not going to go away.
This is all internationally coordinated. I know because they're your people. You communicate with them and support them in many ways. Is this all interconnected? The Wellington movement in New Zealand, Ottawa and Canberra, it's not by coincidence. This is a highly coordinated group, isn't it? Maybe even the likes of which the ASIO Director General has been warning us about.
No, they're not interconnected as far as I can see. It's very much spontaneous, grassroots Australian, just like the Canadian truckies. The Canadian truckies did what they did because they're being decimated, their livelihoods. We saw this going on, and it's still going on in Europe, where we see hundreds of thousands of demonstrators in France, Italy, and I think Germany, and London. And this has just grown up spontaneously. Now, the coercion, the mandating of injections on healthy people has been coordinated. That's quite clear from Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book. And we can see the language, we can see the policies, we can see the common threads throughout the Western world. Canada, America, Europe, Britain, Australia, New Zealand. That's where the coordination is. This is a global attempt to control people, whereas the response has been self-initiated locally, if you call it nation locally.
Yeah, sure. It's certainly a persistent movement at the very least. I'm not sure it'll overturn the consistent medical advice around vaccinations in this country, but of course, we'll have you back as an elected representative and are happy to Malcolm Roberts in the future to argue your case as issues arise. So thanks for joining Afternoon Briefing again so early in the year.